Da 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 da! What's my good chair? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've ever popped into one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And we are well into a half a year working on a project that I thought, right? It was an idea I had in the moment and I just flew with it and I didn't realize how much work it was. Number one, that it was going to be work, that it was going to take my time and it was going to take my honesty, right? Because nobody's watching over me, right? That I have to hold myself accountable, right? And I want to play a good, I want to play a good game in this because I've been looking at it as a game, right? Only because, the topics sometimes are heavy. I didn't realize when I came into these 54 words, these 54 powerful words. And again, if you've never popped into one of my lives, we've been picking a powerful word every Monday and kind of playing with it in different perspectives. These are lessons for myself. This is what I'm thinking in the sequencing of how the words have come about because we have randomly picked these words and it seems each week the word that we pick has been absolutely magnificently perfect for what has been going on in my life or what I'm working towards or what I'm dealing with in the moment or right maybe something in one of those characters that kind of move alongside me is working in. And we all have different stories, we all have different struggles, we all have different dreams and ambitions, goals. So our paths are going to be a little bit different. But the idea was, right, that we do need each other. I live in a province where our very survival, literally our very survival, depends on our neighbor. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and it gets awfully cold in here in the winter, and it gets awfully hot here in the summertime. And so, in those extremes, we depend on our neighbors to lift us up in our moments of weakness, right? Those moments where we really don't have the proper lessons in place. And just as an example, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, people were flooding to Canada. Well, people were flooding to North America in general, but because I'm a Canadian, I'm using Canada as an example because the states were settling their lands at the same time, right? But at that time, it was such a big decision to uproot your family, move somewheres new, somewheres where you had an idea, right? Because Canada was sending out those pamphlets, free land, right? Free money. You have 10 babies. We're going to give you some money, right? The land of plenty. Start your life over. Start again. Pick yourself up, right? And just start over. Come and settle Canada, right? There was a lot of marketing in that. And people had goals, people had dreams, for the most part, pretty simple in their wants because, right, they're coming from situations, probably that were pretty difficult because who wants to leave their home willingly, right? I know. I know for myself, growing up in a dynamic household and being brought up in a well, in a lifestyle that was I don't know. I think it was created for my father, right? And I would never deny him that. He was diagnosed with congenital heart disease very, very early in his life. He never thought even that he was going to live long enough to have his own family. And right, he did. Thank goodness I'm here, right? And I am my father's daughter in that. But my dad was an adventurer. He loved life. He would have done anything to prolong it even longer than what he did. And he doubled his lifespan through the choices that he made in his life. And, we can, blame somebody for not making the proper choice. But in the end, right, these were proper choices for himself and proper choices for us because we got to keep him around for an extra, 27 years longer, I would assume, than what he actually was diagnosed to, right? He pretty much got a death sentence in his teenage years, right? And a lot of the characteristics that I have, my love for Mother Nature, right? My appreciation for life was because my father was that example of appreciation for life, right? So it's in our programming. And right, I call it programming because that's what I hear all over the place. And we pick up these terminologies. And because they're common in all denominations, whether you're right, you have a political idea, cultural idea, religious idea, right? Or you just come from a dynamic family like myself who had characters in their household that you were paying mind to, right? And they became the evidence for you. And we got to make choices in that, in what we wanted to take on as our own and what we wanted to brush off to the side. But keep in mind, right? Lots of us didn't have a great deal, so there was a lot of settling, right? There was a lot of acceptance in that. We're going to pick another word, but this is coming from, you know, I was watching, not watching. I was a student. I was a spectator in a lesson, in a presentation, and it was somebody who reads mannerisms, somebody who looks for cues and signals in our actions for truths and beliefs and movements. And he worked for the justice system, and he was so professional, and he was so good at presenting the lesson, and I got a lot out of the lesson. But it made me think, right, a little bit about the way that I present to the world, right? Because I do present to the world. It's in my goals, it's in my dreams, it's what I'm moving towards. But this is practicing in my craft. But when does practicing in your craft become actually mastering in your craft? And so this is kind of the thoughts that were coming up in my mind while I was watching this lesson. And well, I keep saying watching this lesson, but being involved in the lessons, because we can watch the same lesson. Me and you, we can watch the exact same lesson, but the lesson prerequisites that each one of us has, which is going to be unique to us, is going to make it so that we're going to absorb the lesson differently. Remember, we had these words perception and perspectives, right? Just a couple of weeks ago, and it's in that honoring that it takes all kinds to make the world, that we have to honor that it takes all kinds, and those all kinds have different ideas about so many different things. So again, we could both take in the same lesson, but take something different out of it. Okay, let me have a sip of my coffee. We're going to draw it back in before we pull up our next word. But what I wanted to say about this gentleman, because, right, the video was absolutely just excellent. It was so well put together. He was so well put together. The interviewer was so well put together. And the whole package presented to me was so well put together. But I have to look at how I learn, right? Remember what I said? I was wondering, oh, look at he's right. I'm taking in the lesson, but the other half of my mind is going, look how he's presenting. Look how well he is. Cindy, you're so casual, right? You barely make a point list before you come in live. He pretty much knows exactly what he's going to say from the moment, right? He turns on that camera to the moment he finishes in his presentation. And here come in half the time you have to argue with yourself to hit that live button. Go live, Cindy. You're casual. But my lessons are there, right? My lessons are there in a way that makes it so that maybe somebody, right, like what I did with the lesson he presented by kind of tearing apart how he was presenting it and relating it to how I present it, maybe, right, each of us getting something a little bit by just showing up, just by having these kinds of discussions, that something might hit home with you, and it might not even be anything I said, but it might have triggered something in you that gave you a moment of thought, that gave you an idea, or oh, I wish I could do that, or right, why can't I do that, and move into that action of, right, getting some more information, and what can you do to see if maybe you could step your feet into these fields and see if you even like to or not. So the idea was for me to think, okay, Cindy, you're different, right? Each one of us in this world is unique. And because I bring my lessons, right, in what I'm working on to the table, right? I'm a YouTuber, right? I'm a YouTuber, but I'm also a thought leader. I'm also a sister, right? I'm also somebody working on myself. I'm also somebody who's recognizing for the first time in my life all those missteps, all those failures, all those missed lessons in my life. But in bringing that to the table, right, coming here fresh like a loaf of bread, I have an opportunity to share that in the way that I share that, because I don't take those lessons, right? This was online. I was able to take this lesson, right, in a safe, comfortable space where I'm sitting in. So I was able to take in a lesson from somebody else who was well formed, right? Well put together, that it was a presentation where I have to, right? Sit and be the student, sit and be the spectator. But that's not the way I learn in regular life. As if this was somebody I was sitting across the table from, I would be very, very distracted. I would be thinking about how do I leave the room? How can I get this over with as soon as I can? I'd have my pen and my notebook sitting in front of me, and I would be doodling, making palm trees and sunsets, and my eyeballs, I'd make horse heads and cat heads. This is what I did in school, right? Because I wasn't paying attention to what was, I guess, the authority figure sitting in front of me, because he was so well put together. He was so well formed, because the lesson, the way it was presented, right? I couldn't sit in that. So I think specifically, I come online. And it's not like I don't know my lessons, right? I know my lessons too, but I also know if you're anything like me, you're not going to digest it if I'm sitting here all prim and proper with my collar done up, using the perfect words without smiling, going by the textbook, referencing absolutely everything and being flawless in that, because that wouldn't be true to me, because I am full of flaws, right? As much as I'm full of myself, I am full of misunderstandings. I am full of missed lessons, right? But I feel comfortable and I feel safe, right? I feel comfortable and I feel safe, and I'm hoping that, whoever pops into my lives feels comfortable and safe and in my style of presenting the lessons, right? Which always come from an experience, a conversation, something I read online, a video, right? We get our lessons from all different spaces, but where I'm comfortable is where I'm not being dictated to, that it's by my choice to sit in as a spectator, as a student, right? And take in a good lesson. It was a it was a good lesson. But the lesson I got out of that didn't have anything to do about what was he doing. He reads people, he reads mannerisms and stuff like that. I didn't even pay attention to any of that. I was paying attention to him and how he was giving his lessons. And I was kind of in the moment going, "Oh, Cindy, you could, right? You could do that. Can't you just put yourself together a little bit better, right? Can you make a better point list, right? Can you get out the whiteboard?" No, I can't do that. Why? Because that's not me. That's not me. And I would like to think that I could be me in this process and have that wonderful feeling of actually being discovered and appreciated for the person that I am and not the person that I'm presenting. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Okay, highlighter. We're going to talk a couple of minutes. First impression, first perspective, first thing that comes to my mind. We'll just kind of fly with it for a few minutes, maybe a half an hour, maybe an hour, maybe 5 minutes, right? But let's pick our new word, and we're going to yap about it all week, you guys. Okay, here we go. Oh my goodness, you guys. Finally, finally, we've done this word already. This was word number 16. Oh, you guys. Just when I thought we were picking our 36th word, we are picking our 16th word again, you guys. We are this week. Man, this was a toughy one. And I thought I had it. I really did think I had it. This week, you guys, we're talking about forgiveness. My first perspective, the first thing that came to my mind was, what didn't I get right last time? How did we come at this word forgiveness? And I remember we talked a little bit about my mother passing away, and how me and my mother were able to heal some wounds, right? We maybe didn't heal all the wounds because, right, I did have a devouring mother, right? And if you don't know what a devouring mother, there are lots of experts out there, right? And maybe we'll talk about it when I'm a little bit more confident that I am the expert in the devouring mother. But I know enough, right, through my own experience to recognize, right, that we make mistakes along the way. And, I had an opportunity to have a conversation with my mother a few times about the relationship that we had that was very dynamic, very painful. And I do believe now, through a few lessons, that it was probably very painful for her too, right? That I probably made her as comfortable, well, maybe not as uncomfortable as she made me, because she was the authority figure, right? She was that authority figure. But I do recognize why this word forgiveness would come up again, because it is such a painful thorn in my life, right? It has stunted me in, it has stunted me in having a life that I didn't know that I could have, because I didn't realize that I was worthy of having any other life than what was being dictated to me. And if there's a little bit of bitterness in that, well, then you can recognize why this word forgiveness might have come and hit my plate again this week, right? And I will accept that we have to do a little bit of more work on this word forgiveness. I know my mother was an extension of her parents, just like my sisters, right, are extensions of my mother. And so maybe this isn't a week that we're going to talk about forgiveness in the same way as what we talked about it last time in reference to my mother, but maybe some of those relationships that were so important in my life, that were my lifeline. They were my social group, right? My sisters, my best friends, maybe my only true friends. I don't think so. I do believe I have been graced with many amazing characters in my life, and maybe they didn't love me as much as I loved them, but maybe some of them loved me more than I appreciated them. It's a learning process for all of us. It truly is. You know, forgiveness, I don't know. Forgiveness for myself. Gave it some thought this week, you know, looking at my movement, looking at not just my movement in these past half a dozen years or so when I've just started waking up to some of these ideas, but looking at that movement as a child, as an adolescent, as a teenager, and as a young adult, right? And take a look at the characters in my life and look at those interactions that we had. Remember what I said, that, it was just as painful for my mother to be around me, I'm sure, than it was for me to be around her. It would have felt different, but it would have been, right, not comfortable in any way. I do remember my mother sending me off on the holidays, on Christmas holidays, and on summer holidays, and on spring breaks, just because she just didn't want me around, right? That she would send me off to my mother, or send me off to my aunt and uncle, who were trappers up in the, right, in the bush, the middle of the bush, out in British Columbia. And I did that every year. I always thought that it was my father looking out for my well being, right? That my father knew that I wasn't comfortable being left alone with my mother when he went away, right? That he tried the best that he could in his creative mind to find ways to, well, help me out along the way. But that was his wife too, so I'm sure that he took her into consideration, and he probably knew that it was probably pretty difficult on her too. I wasn't a problem child. That's one thing. I wasn't a problem child, right? I was the good daughter, right? I was that scapegoat. But whatever, look at me like I'm the black sheep. I had no control over that, and grateful that I had my father, who was the example for me in, right, showing me the lessons through his own experience, not telling me, but showing me, right, through his own experience in his, right, just like I love Mother Nature and I love life. I'm so grateful to be here, right? And I can literally say I'm grateful to be here because it's 62 years old. That's a very high age for my family. I'm going for 114. I'm going for 114. Right? It's part of my affirmations, along with I'm grateful for my good health, but I am grateful for my good health. So my affirmations, I'm putting just as much belief into that, right, as my good health, recognizing through the evidence that I do have good health, that, right, the same will come about and I will live to be 114. That's not the norm in my family. A lot of stroke, a lot of heart attacks, a lot of anxiety, right, a lot of addictions, a dynamic family, right? I guess who loved each other the best that they could, some more than others, but, right, just accepting that which is just there, which just is, and being grateful to recognize what it is, and then just getting out of the way of what's not comfortable, right? Forgive myself in how I made people feel, and forgive others too at the same time, understanding that I don't rub everybody well. In fact, there's a couple of people I know that just my very existence is an irritation, but, right, I'm just trying to live my own life to the best of my ability as I possibly can and bring those lessons to the table, right? But in doing that, grateful that I still have an opportunity to mix and socialize, right? Because this is a social experiment. Definitely believe that this is a social experiment. We got this word forgiveness this week, Nancy. I know you're there. Hi, Nancy. Um, we got this word forgiveness this week. I forgive myself for not getting it right the first time. And maybe part of it I did get right. But because it's such an expansive lesson, that it needs more time, it needs different perspectives on that. And I guess that's what we're going to do this week. So I'll be back at it tomorrow with this word forgiveness. Wow. I don't know how I'm going to come at it a little bit, but I do recognize is that I'm going to be more involved in that. It's not about anybody except for me. So maybe tomorrow we can come at it in a way where it's actually pertinent to me. And then maybe you might see a reflection in that for yourself, the evidence, right? Maybe pick up something totally different, right? Like I said, I took in a lesson today, but it was a totally different lesson that was trying to get across my path. But was it any less a lesson? Not not a chance, because it made me look at, right, how I come to the table. How do I want to come to the table, right? I think honestly and genuinely and in conversation, like I've been doing right from the very start. I think that works for me. right? I think that works for me. And I think it might work for others, right? Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you so much for popping in to my live. I'm just heading out now. I'm gonna have my finish my coffee here. I'm not sure if I'm gonna take any more lessons. Right. I didn't do much today. My energy levels were not super high. They weren't super low. Managed to get the dishes done and right, clean the bathroom and piddle around a little bit in my apartment. But I did have plans for my set of days off. I did have goals and responsibilities. And I have to remember if we're in this lesson this week, forgiveness, well, I think a good way to start is to forgive myself for not working on what I said I was going to work on today. And then we're just going to give it another shot tomorrow and see how it goes. Okay, you guys. Have a great night, and I guess we'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.